Welcome to Chaos, Courage and Coffee, the podcast for anyone who's felt like on the outside I'm holding it together, but inside I'm struggling.
And we do it with honesty, heart, and just enough coffee to get through the day.
Good morning, Vanessa.
Hi, Brett. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yep, very good, thank you. Yes, definitely good at the minute. I have a topic for today that I would like to discuss that came to me, and it's really in summary, it's about when we set limits, but we don't realize we're doing it. So I'm going to explain what I mean. I've seen a look on your face, and I will explain to you what I mean. But I was noticing, I'll use quite an obvious one that a lot of people use, and that's weight, as in your physical body weight. And we always like, okay, for example, I keep an eye on my weight. I like to keep fit, so I check my weight. I have some measurement checks. And I worked out what I was doing. I have this kind of upper limit that I don't go past. And so I worked out that what everybody does, and you don't necessarily realize you're doing it, but I'm explaining it with weight because it's one that people probably do have and you can relate to it. So obviously, like when I was younger, I wasn't as heavy, and you get to middle age and you reach a limit, but I've got this upper limit. It's like, I can't go past that. Oh my God, that would be shocking to go past that. And so you've sort of got it at the back of your mind. And then when you get to your limit or near your limit, I don't know what happens, but you kind of kick in, you do a few extra walks or whatever it is you do, or you start starving yourself. But you don't realize that you've got this kind of inbuilt limit of what you'll tolerate. So I'll just take it more abstract and then you can chime in. Another one that we have is what we'll tolerate from other people. So as a parent, like, when your kids get a little bit lippy and they start answering back, and you're like, you kind of subconsciously thinking, this is getting a little bit out of order. They're pushing it a bit. And then you reach that point and you're like, you will not speak to me like that, whether you say it like that or not, but that's what you're thinking and you're getting irritated. So do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do know what you mean. It's when, so you're using the word limits, which is fine. Other people might call them boundaries. And we can take boundaries in a different direction as well. But yeah, I do know what you mean, and having that limit. And yes, I do have my own weight limits as well. So I can relate. Yeah, it's interesting that we set these limits or these boundaries in all sorts of areas, all different aspects of our lives. And sometimes, like your example with children, we don't say anything or we don't say anything early until they go past that mark, or you're having an off day and your self-restraint might be a little bit less. And then quite often we explode. And, and that can create problems, because if we're not addressing our limits early, then we're not setting the standard for behavior for people to stay within. But I think it is still important to know where those boundaries are. But having said that, it is important to know where they are. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't know where their own limits or boundaries are. And so we get upset about things because people aren't respecting our limits or our boundaries, but we don't know why, and we can't explain why because we don't understand it ourselves. So I don't know if this was where you wanted to go.
No, this is really helpful, because what it is like you said, we kind of ignore it when we're getting near to the level. Another word for it is your tolerance level. And then what you do is you kind of snap. Now, that's the bit that's important, is we kind of should have got in early, or the ideal is to get in early. However, we don't. And when you don't, you snap. But that's your clue, right? Your clue is not, oh, that other person did something wrong. Your clue is, why did I not step in and think, oh, this is getting to my boundary? The reason you didn't is because you didn't notice the feeling. Like you did, but not consciously. So it becomes about being aware of this feeling inside you and then kind of almost like time out before it gets past that so you can deal with it before you explode. And I don't know if we want to take it back to something that doesn't relate to somebody else and it's your own personal thing, like your weight. You might want to, like, you might notice that the scales are going up and you're like, but it's still within your boundary, right? So you don't take action, you don't do anything about it. And then one day you get on, you're like, oh my God, I've gone over. And it's like, panic, all action, blah, blah, blah. So it's noticing the creep, maybe, when you're getting close to it, because that stops going over your limit or your tolerance and then having to react emotionally to going over it.
I think I think in a lot of circumstances we are aware that we feel uncomfortable. Perhaps we might not want to have that difficult conversation with somebody, or maybe even with ourselves, and set the boundary early. I think also what we don't do is reflect around why I don't like this. What is it about this situation that makes me uncomfortable, or, don't I like, or why does this upset me? Those sorts of things, to be able to, and I think it's particularly important with other people when you're talking about interactions, relationships, those sorts of things. It's really important for people to spend their time on self-reflection, identify and understand what is it that's making me uncomfortable and why is that important to me. And I think that's probably the bigger part, is we don't spend the time understanding ourselves well enough to be able to communicate to others.
Yeah, it's interesting when you're saying that, because I was thinking, and you've summarized it, it's like we don't turn it inwards, we put it onto the other person, especially if it's a conflict. I mean, if it's something that's just within yourself, we kind of, even then, we push it to the outside. Oh, it's because it was Christmas and I had more to drink. So if we're going to the weight thing. But your point is, we tend to turn it outwards and not into ourselves. Therefore, it doesn't get dealt with because we're trying to put it onto the other person. So say, let's take it back to children. We think it's the child that did the wrong thing. They shouldn't have spoken to us like that. In fact, if we turned it inwards, we'd be created an awareness within ourselves and stepped in early, we wouldn't have reached that point. And even if we do reach that point, we still need to reflect back on, what was that? Why did that trigger me? And why did I let it happen? And all sorts of questions like that.
Yeah, why didn't I address it early? And again, the why, I think it's, you're right. We spend a lot of time in blame. You did this, you did that. But we don't look at ourselves. How did I contribute to this? And I think when it comes to our limits or our boundaries, we need to look at not so much how did I contribute, because that's not the right question in this circumstance, but why does this upset me? And what is it that, I suppose you could say, what button is being pushed that I don't like in this circumstance? And it's not until we understand that we're able to have those conversations and express ourselves clearly, to be able to say, I don't like this for these reasons. This is very important to me. And having those adult conversations with the people around us. Now, with children, obviously, we can't have those adult conversations, but we can say that I don't like this. I don't like this behavior because it makes me feel like this. How would you feel if I said this to you? And you can start having some more, I suppose, emotionally mature conversations with children, even though they might not necessarily understand fully. I think to some degree, it's starting them down a better communication path into adult relationships.
I think you've got a really good point, because it's about how we express it. So what happens if we ignore it is our expression is pretty poor. It comes out as a bit of a, I don't know. Yeah, exactly that. So it's all about the expression of it. And you know what this does for children is so children copy parents. So my mother, she was particularly good at exploding all the time. And I reached a point, an age, and I realized I'd just learnt to do this. I learnt that this was, again, going back right full circle, this was an acceptable thing. I didn't know different until like kind of grown up, and I was just like, you just don't do this. It's not acceptable. So children copy parents because they assume that parents know best and parents are doing the right thing. They have not yet realized that we are not perfect. So they're copying us, and that's how they're learning. So if we're exploding or expressing it poorly, that's how they learn to do it. So what we want to do, because we want to teach our children how to express really well, is we need to learn to do it for ourselves. So it is all about how we express it. And this is where we want to kind of get in, because when you're exploding, when you're going over your limit, you're not expressing yourself well. So you pull it back and you express it from, yeah, I'm feeling this. There's a whole kind of different relationship, different topic really about how we kind of relate to each other and how we express it really well. But the point really is get yourself in early before you've exploded, or, your buttons are being pressed or you've gone too far, because then you can express it from a more logical, or in Brett's words, mature viewpoint, rather than an emotional stance, which quite often does not come out very well.
When we allow our emotions to get involved, our communication tends to be quite poor. And look, I think it's something that came up for me when you were talking then. Express it early. We are more likely to do this in the workplace with a workload. I can't handle it, although some people will take on more and more and more, and they'll just drown in work. I think some people are more willing to say, no, that's my limit in a work environment than they are in a relationship context. And I think when we do that, we're doing ourselves a disservice. We are not helping ourselves. We are not helping the relationship, because we're not setting those boundaries, limits and expectations of who am I? We start to lose ourselves in the relationship if we don't have those limits of, this is important to me, this is where I end, you begin, those sorts of things. And again, that can be a whole nother conversation. But I think it's important that we, going back, I suppose, full circle, we spend the time to understand ourselves and why this is important to me. Why does this upset me? And what do I need to do about it? And when we can do that, we can come to the conversation calmly. We can express ourselves clearly because we've put thought into it, and we are more likely to get a favorable response rather than blowing up, being very emotional, damaging the relationship, especially at that particular moment in time, maybe not permanently, but having those bad patterns or poor patterns of expression, I suppose, of, exploding and hurting people. Because I think that's what we do when we are in that highly emotionally charged state and not communicating very well. We sometimes say things we don't mean. We say things in a mean and nasty way, and we hurt feelings and can damage a relationship like that. So, yeah, I think it's really important. I think great topic.
I think what happens when we're emotionally charged is it starts to become personal and we accuse the other person. Now, what happens, it's just human nature, is when you get accused of something, so the minute they say you did, or you whatever, we get defensive, right? That's an automatic reaction because the other person then isn't logical either. So that's why it damages it, because we start to get very personal and we haven't sort of turned it in, and it's like, I feel. So this is why we need to get in early, because as Brett said, it kind of goes pretty downhill when the emotions are running the show. So what I want to think about is, how can we, wind back and get to the beginning and actually prevent the whole process? Because this is a process and it becomes a pattern, and it will be a pattern that we've learned. So it's nothing against you personally if you're doing this, right? You can't help it. It's a pattern. It's a program. You were probably programmed with this when you were a child, when you were young, like I said, because it comes from your parents quite often. It comes from your environment. So think in terms of a computer where you were programmed with Windows 95. I love the computer analogy. I use it quite a lot, so I've probably used it before. We are now on Windows. Actually, I don't know whether we're on Windows 11, 12, 13. Actually, I don't know, 13, 14. I don't know what we're on. But the point is, you need to upgrade it because the old program you're running, it doesn't work so well for you. And upgrading it, let's talk about what that looks like. We've talked a little bit of how to flag it up, really. Okay. So if you're, back some years ago, my flag would have been me losing it, right? That was it. The only time I knew that something was wrong. I couldn't see any of the steps before that. I just saw the losing it step. And then I couldn't trace it back to see when it was starting, and I couldn't get in earlier. That's what we're trying to do. So if you're like I was, where you lose it, okay, so you're getting triggered and you lose it, and that is where your awareness starts, then that's fine. That's where you start to change this. So being aware when you lose it, don't worry about it. Don't stress. Yeah, it's not great, but they're okay. Something happened, okay? And we start to trace it back. Now, you might be someone who manages to hold it all together and you don't lose it, but you're still getting triggered. So you need to be aware of what's happening in you, okay, that's not comfortable. That's your guide. Does this make sense, Brett, what I'm saying?
Yeah, it absolutely does. I was just listening because everything's making absolute sense to me anyway. So it's about asking those questions of ourselves. Why? Why do I feel this way? What is it about this situation that makes me feel this way? And really identifying and understanding in ourselves, I suppose, why this is important to us. And once we've done the logical, and there's a lot of conversation, the words inner work. Once we've done the inner work, the work on ourselves to understand why this is important, and as we say, asking those questions, then we can start to resolve the issues in a way that is more constructive, doesn't damage relationships. But you're right. It's looking inwards. Yes, we have the explosions. It's not ideal. As you say, it's, as I said before, sometimes damaging to relationships. It hurts people. It hurts ourselves because we're emotionally charged. We don't necessarily like being in that emotional state. So the things, if we can do the things ourselves to resolve or to change our approach, then I think that can have some better outcomes. And not just for you, better outcomes personally, better outcomes for relationships, better outcomes for those around us as well.
Let's to help people get clear on how you can track it. If we go back to the concrete things that aren't relationships, like your weight or your eating or your exercise or time, people who are late, this is another really good one. When you're always someone who's always late, it's because you allow it to happen, because it is okay. And there's no judgment on that, but your rule is it's okay to be 5 minutes late. It's okay to be 10 minutes late. Start here with noticing those things if you're not so used to flagging these things up, and start noticing the feeling in you. So like if you're someone you're okay with being 10 minutes late, but notice what happens if it starts to go over 10 minutes and you thinking, oh my God, I'm going to be later than 10 minutes late. That there's a feeling inside you. This is what we want to pay attention to. These are the flags, if you like. It's the feelings inside you that actually we ignore. Like, I know what it's like when I'm late, I just start stressing and everything starts going wrong. That's what I need to notice. That's what that means is I'm about to go outside one of my limits or boundaries or tolerances. So does that make sense about flagging up those more concrete things? You're smiling. I'm guessing that something hit a point there for you.
Any veteran listening to this is in a mild state of anxiety right now. Veterans aren't late. Veterans are 5 minutes early, 5 minutes before 5 minutes early, even. And any veteran out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're right. Veterans don't do that. They've been trained, indoctrinated, if you like. You're always early. If you're on time, you're late.
Yeah.
Uh,
So you're going to start stressing if you're not going to be 5 minutes early because then you're late.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Late early. Yeah.
So that's it's trained into us because there was severe consequences, and in the military context, and I know I'm taking a side path here, but in the military context, being late can cost people lives in wars. So we're very big on not being late. Being early is okay. We can stop early and wait, but you definitely can't be late. So that's why I was laughing at you talking about time. And I have my own views on that, and I've had conversations with people in the past, loved ones, about being late and those sorts of things. And it's not always about me. It's sometimes about others. I was with my father, so personal relationship. When we talk about being late and bound limits and those sorts of things. When I was growing up, I was always told, "You can't be late." This is Dad. We can't be late. We had to be home on time if we're out playing with friends, whatever. You had to be home by this time, and if we were late, we're in trouble. That was fine. We learned and we grew up that way. As we got older and we became adults and started organizing family events, Dad would consistently be late, and Mum would always blame Dad. And Dad would say, "It doesn't matter. Time is not that important. We're here now. It's all okay." When it comes to being late, it's not necessarily about you. It can be about the people around you. And I pointed out to him that, uh, do you consider, or have you considered, the impact that your lateness has on the people around you? We're waiting to have a meal and you're holding everybody up because you're not here. Or you could eat without me. It's the respect aspect of being late sometimes. And it's not respect for you, it's your respect for others, that other people's time isn't so important to you. And coming from my military background, that was my limit. I had to set and explain that to my father, that, you raised us this way to be on time, and now you have decided to change the rules. You are disrespecting us by not, living to the own standards that you raised us to.
You know what you've touched on there, which is what comes into it is values. So whether you're deciding that respect, you're relating it to respect, and that's what's important. So if you want to know what's behind your limit, it will be your values. Because I've got the same one about being on time. Just quickly sharing with that on that one, and I've tried to be late because I'm in New Zealand, and time is a bit of a fluffy concept. I can't be late. I've tried so hard to be late, but there's always this inner thing, and it just doesn't happen. And it's to do with our upbringing, and it's to do with our values. So that's actually what's behind it. I mean, that's not a topic for now because we're going to start wrapping up. But and just know that behind these limits are some very, very important structures of your life. There are values, and this is why you keep kind of reverting back to these or getting triggered. So maybe we should do a wrap up of maybe a few steps just to summarize what we discussed today.
Okay, so we talked about limits. We've talked about how if we don't identify and address our limits early, we can explode. Things can turn out poorly anyway. So the important thing is to ask, why am I upset now? Regardless of the expression, Why does this upset me? And what about this is important to me? Because that then helps us identify what our limit is and why it's important. And having that internal conversation, that internal recognition allows us to address that with other people in a constructive way and a less emotional way.
And so trying to get in early and noticing the emotion in you as it starts to build up so that you're not waiting until it's kind of too late. And it's okay if the first few times you get to too late, still look at it then and learn to step in earlier.
Absolutely.
Wow, wonderful conversation. Thanks, Brett.
Great topic. Thank you, Vanessa.
Thanks for being with us today on Chaos, Courage and Coffee. Remember, you're not alone and you don't have to figure it all out at once. What part of today's conversation stood out for you?
This podcast is about showing up in the mess, not waiting until it's all sorted out. If today helped, share it with someone else who might need it too.
And if you're navigating your own version of chaos, we'd love to hear about it. Leave a comment, message us, or join the conversation.
We'll be back soon with more honest talk, less pressure, and just enough courage to get through whatever's next.
See you next time on Chaos, Courage and Coffee.